Hello. I actually registered this speak in English, so I think I need to stick to that in case there's someone who chose this because it is in English. So I'm Victoria. I've been in the Agile kind of community for a very long time, maybe a little bit more invisible in the latest years, but still. I'm a CTO at a CPTO in reality at Tradedoubler. And I'm going to talk today about the core of Agile. So, okay, this picture. A lot of tools and toys that you could use when you do Agile. And all these tools and toys, of course, they have a value. I mean, they're there for a reason. Someone created them because they needed a tool. But all of them are good for different things, and they are solving some kind of problem you have. And if you don't have that problem, you probably don't need to use it. But all these tools and toys, even though there is value in all of them, they doesn't guarantee Agile at all, to be honest. So some Agile coaches tend to focus a lot on these tools and toys to do them right. And if you do them right, then you're Agile. And sorry, but that's just not true. So try to figure out why these exist and what they're there to solve. And if you have that problem, use them, but do that wisely. So what is Agile really then? Well, if we think about the core of Agile, where it comes from, it is about admitting that you don't know. That's it. And when you admit that you just don't know, then you have to deal with that fact. And when you have to deal with that, then suddenly Agile just arises. Because if you don't know something, you have to guess. That is like having a hypothesis. And you have to test if that hypothesis is right. You do some experiments and then you learn from them. And you don't want to waste a lot of money and time on something when you don't know the outcome. That's why you want to release often and have value along the way so that you just don't waste your money. So if you start with admitting that you don't know, then Agile just will happen regardless of tools and toys. But hey, wait a second. Sometimes you actually do know. Well, then you don't have to use Agile. We do a lot of things that we actually do know. It can be like maintenance, smaller change requests, smaller stuff. You're going to just sort some table in a different order or something. You don't need to use Agile to do that. You know exactly the outcome and what you want, the result you want. Just do it. It would probably be overkill to do Agile with all the ceremonies and all the tools and everything when you already know. It's super clear. I'm going to switch a tool from this to that. It's going to behave exactly the same afterwards. I just have to do it. There's nothing to experiment and learn from. Then just do it. Don't do too much. So, but I do expect that all of you in here sometimes do have something that is new, unknown, that you build upon. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. So I'm going to assume Agile, okay? So I've seen many, many times when companies use these Agile tools and ceremonies in a very non-Agile way. And that's because they assume that they do know. So if you think about larger companies where you have project models on top of everything, you run big projects where you have project managers that has to have a budget and a time frame for the project. Then you have to assume that you know the delivery, because otherwise you can't put a budget on it. You can't put a time frame unless you specify what's going to be built up front. And then suddenly, when you do that, and the project managers are measured on delivering on time and on budget, that assumes that you already know. Why do you do Scrum with the development teams? It's pretty useless because the direction and the objective of the project is already decided. So it's kind of an Agile theater when you do that. You also have the opposite when, pressing the wrong button. If you take this company who built Tesla, this is a computer on wheels, if you wonder what it is. And this company has an agile mindset. I don't think they use agile. I don't know. And it doesn't really matter, to be honest, if they do Scrum or not, because the company has an agile mindset. They started with saying, okay, we're going to build a new electric car. No one's done this before, so we can't know. We can't know how it's going to be used and what the owners want. We don't know anything. So let's make it possible to change when we learn new stuff. So what they did was building a car with so little hardware as possible, and they created software instead because you can update that. And that was why they had this screen in the car and no buttons, because you can also update the screen when you learn more, but you can't do that with buttons. So they had an agile mindset. So it doesn't matter if you do Scrum or not, because they are just agile. And the same goes for the autopilot. It learns new stuff when it are in new situations. So this is like an adaptive company. That is agile without the tools. So when you talk about leadership, it has exactly the same thing. Agile leadership and the type of leadership you need in an agile company is a leadership to start with exactly the same assumption that we don't know. Because if we don't have leaders admitting that they don't know, the agile methodology doesn't work. If you have a leader that said, we can't invest in this project unless we know what's going to deliver, then you have a problem. Because then you're stuck in this having to create business cases and the plans and everything around that. As soon as a leader say, well, we don't know, so I want to minimize the risk instead, then something happens. Then we start to do this agile of breaking things down and deliver smaller experiments to reduce risk, to avoid wasting money on something that's not going to work. So it starts with, if you don't have this in your company, leaders saying, we don't know, so let's minimize risk, then you can do agile, but it's not really agile. And another thing also happens when leaders admit that they don't know, and that is when you, as a leader, don't know. Oh, I'm on one picture wrong, but it doesn't matter. When you have a leader who don't know, then they tend to be better at listening to people. They tend to ask a lot of questions. They want to understand why there are different opinions in the company. Just because they have this mantra in their head saying, what if I'm wrong? And we don't want to be wrong, so we start listening, we start involving people. And when you do that, when you start involving people in that way, that you listen, you bring them in, I want your opinion, I want all opinions, I want the best solution. When you do that, then you create this involvement, participation, and you make change very easy to drive. And what you want to be as a leader is efficient. And the most efficient way of being a leader, I mean, Agile is all about being efficient, isn't it? So if you want to be a really efficient leader, then you start involving people, because then you don't have to explain, you don't have to convince, you don't have to sell stuff, because people are already with you. And that makes change very easy to drive, and then you're very efficient as a leader. So Agile, the core of Agile comes from exactly the same assumption, regardless if it's culture, leadership, methodology, whatever it is from the assumption that we don't know. And we can't have that kind of control that you want if you think you know. Instead of control, we are always trying to minimize risk instead. So, am I early on time? I think so. Amazing. But what I want to say, the whole point, agility is organizational humility. It's being humble about the fact that we can't know and we don't know. And when we do, agile, that just happens. To start with that, and agile happens. Thank you. I'm a bit early, but it's fine.
Tack så mycket, Annika.